I'm Lieutenant Colonel Stephanie Johnson. I am the Sexual Harassment Assault Response and Prevention Program Manager for First Corps. I work for General Lanza. I want to start off by thanking y'all for allowing us to be here. It really is an honor to present this panel. The military has made many improvements over the last several years in how it responds to and prevents sexual assaults. On a daily basis, we continue to learn. This is a continual fight. As mentioned earlier, universities and the military have a lot to learn from each other. And we have started a partnership with the University of Washington to allow us to learn from each other. And I think we're going to see a lot come out of that partnership. Today, we will share some of our good and bad lessons learned that really is helping us change our culture in the military. We have a great panel here today. Each member will provide insight into how we at Joint Base Lewis-McChord are providing a comprehensive, sensitive, and coordinated system of intervention, care, and justice for victims of sexual assault. As Alan talked about this morning, this is our collaborative effort right here, this team. And I'm sitting right in front of her, so it's going to be hard for me to introduce her. I'm going to duck. Lieutenant Colonel Celia Cruz is the 7th Infantry Division Sharp. Did I mention what Sharp stood for? Okay, good. I wanted to make sure, because you're going to hear us use the word Sharp all over the place. And that's just our term for harassment and assault, prevention and response. Yeah, I did it backwards. Lieutenant Catherine Rowe, she is the 7th ID. She was a company victim advocate, so you will get to see that perspective that General Dahl talked about this morning. Sergeant First Class Beecham. He is actually 2-2 Stryker Brigade Combat Team Sexual Assault Response Coordinator. Sergeant First Class Gary McCarthy, 3-2 Stryker Brigade Combat Team Sexual Assault Response Coordinator. Captain Matt Iese, Chief of Legal Assistance in the Special Victims Counsel, which is a new program in the military, and very excited about that program. I think there will be a lot of questions, hopefully, that'll be generated from that. Miss Wendy Russell, she is the Sexual Assault Care Coordinator for the Madigan Army Medical Center. And Special Agent Fonville, she's the Sexual Assault Investigator for the Criminal Investigation Division. And at the very end down there is Major Jerry Haynes. She is Chief of the Criminal Law Division for First Corps. Each member will give a brief description on what their role is in the fight against sexual assault, and then we'll open it up to questions. And if at any time, y'all, this is such a small group, so if there's any questions throughout the panel, please just raise your hands and we'll address it right. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Can you hear me? Okay, good. As Stephanie told you, I'm the program manager for 7th Infantry Division. Stephanie controls and directs everything that happens across all of Joint Base Lewis-McChord, which is about 150,000 people. The population that I'm responsible for is much smaller than that. 16,000 soldiers and their family members. And along with the folks that she's mentioned to you, we have a couple others in the audience with us. I want to point out my deputy, Captain Emily Hayes, right there, and then Lieutenant Colonel Volke, who's not part of SHARP, but he does do analysis, which enables us to look at some of those vulnerabilities and the strengths of the system. So you might consider that if you have questions for that area. We've been doing some brainstorming over the last couple of weeks since Stephanie contacted me about this to try to figure out what we can provide to you that might be relevant, that you might find helpful. We don't want to be pods and tell you that you needed to do it this way or that way. So we've been trying to figure out how we can be more relevant to you. So please come up with your most provocative questions.
I'm Lieutenant Rowe. I was a victim advocate at the company level, will also be a platoon leader and a rear detachment company commander. I moved to 7AD Sharp in July, and I served as a victim advocate and also work all the operations of the shop. So any sort of training that we need to get down all the way to the lowest level, we publish an order for them to conduct that. We also do case management, which we every month go through every open case in 790 to ensure that there's proper follow-up, there's the victim receiving services, the victim has a safety assessment. On top of that, the adjudication and closure of the case happens in a relatively time-efficient manner.
Sergeant First Class Christopher Beecham. I'm the 22 Brigade Sharp Victim Advocate at full time. Some of my day-to-day activities are I control and manage all cases that come through the brigade itself. The brigade is roughly 4,500 people, but obviously not that many victims. Those are just the number of stories that we do have. I manage all cases that come through, and I also manage the actual Sharp Victim Advocate for qualified individuals within the brigade. So I can assign victim advocates to the actual individual or the victim and be able to help the victim and the victim advocate get through with the process of the need.
I'm Sergeant First Class Gary McCarthy. I'm the 3rd Brigade Sexual Assault Response Coordinator. Like Sergeant Beecham, I have a population of about 4,500 people that we provide advocacy for, with about 72 victim advocates inside that brigade. My sole responsibility is to maintain case management, coordinate with CIC and sexual assault counselors, track and manage and distribute all cases to provide feedback through our case management group that we'll talk about earlier.
Good morning. My name is Captain Matt Iesi. I'm a military judge advocate, military attorney. And my role is the chief of the Special Victim Counsel program, which is a new program the Army created at Congress's direction to provide attorneys and advocates to victims of sexual assault to help them with through the court-martial process, advocate their legal rights during the trial, and advocate for them on post and provide legal assistance to victims of sexual assault. I formerly served as a prosecutor for Colonel Florkers at that division. I've also served as a defense counsel. So I have 3 full-time attorneys that I manage for sexual assault, and 3 additional part-time special victim counsel provide representation for any soldier, family member, and other entitled individuals to those legal services.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Russell, and I am the only civilian on this panel. My role as the sexual assault care coordinator is to ensure that when we get a client reported to us or told to us that they've had an incident of some kind, that we make sure they have adequate behavioral health and medical follow-up. My responsibility is to ensure we have contact with that individual and offer that service to them within about a 48-hour window, and also to make sure that they can get into medical providers as fast as we can get them in. The unique thing about Madigan Army Medical Center is that it's the only Army installation that has a dedicated sexual assault clinic. So we are very, very fortunate in that we have leadership that really supports this mission. And in addition, we are one of the few installations where that is the sexual assault care coordinator responsibilities are the only responsibilities for our staff. So that is something to keep in mind about how we're leading the way for this program in the military.
My name is Special Agent Sarah Fonville. I'm a special agent with the U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Division. Kind of give you an idea of what I do is I investigate all felony level sexual assaults in the military, in the Army specifically. One of the things I'd like for all of you to know is that the Army or the military in general has really figured out that in order to investigate these crimes, you have to have specialized people who have specialized training in order to do that. Given the nature of these crimes, they're very personal, and they involve somebody who is extremely traumatized as a victim. And you have to have special people who kind of understand the environment and the actual crime in order to do so. So my job is I sit at the Sharp Resource Center, and I provide expertise to all of the components of the sexual assault response team. Part of my job also is to provide that information that I gathered during my investigations to kind of help develop that operational environment so we can attack this problem before it becomes a problem. That's pretty much what I do. If you have any questions about any of the specialized training that we as the Army have developed, feel free to ask me.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Major Jerry Haynes, and maybe my job title might be most familiar to you all. He's I'm Chief of the Criminal Law Division of the First Corps. That's exactly what it sounds like. So I manage our 7 prosecutors who advise commanders and prosecute sexual assaults committed on JBLM or off JBLM. And I do want to emphasize that some of our greatest successes over the last year have been cases where the local jurisdiction felt there was sufficient evidence or forensic to prosecute or retake the trial and convictions. I also manage our 2 victim witness liaisons on post. So these are civilians who work with our victims and are kind of like the title says, sort of liaisons between our Special Victim Counsel, between our prosecutors and the Victim Counsel. They provide information to witnesses on what their rights are throughout the process, on what compensation they need to what have you. And then I also work very closely with our Special Victim Prosecutor, and I aim on the first job where we are having most successes where we are recognizing that sometimes we're trying to specialized knowledge to really get after this problem. And so we do have special victim prosecutors who provide their expertise to all of our prosecutors when we are prosecuting sexual assault cases. They have specialized training, significant more experience in prosecuting these types of cases. So I look forward to giving our extensive
So it sounds like some of y'all do your job full-time in this panel, and then some of you part-time and do other things, or are y'all all full-time?
That's all full-time.
Okay.
But we do have a number of part-time, we call it collateral duties. There are a number of those on the installation that aren't collateral duties.
The majority of us, ma'am, have actually been, at some point in time, the collateral duty side. At some point in time, we have, at least for myself and Sergeant McCarthy, we have been company to time victim advocates, which is why we were chosen to be the next level up at the brigade level.
And that's an important piece if we talk about that we try to stress is to be able to work at them lower levels before you move up to the full-time level, because down at the baseline is where you're going to learn everything that you need to know about case management and about the brigade.
So I'm impressed by the considerable amount of resources and people power you've dedicated to the issue, and it's amazing, it's wonderful. I'm here at the University of Washington. And I just wonder, what kind of assessment did you do, or was there an assessment in really helping determine how much staff and what type of resources were needed?
Stephanie and I came into our jobs about the same time, a little over a year ago. And nearly all of us in my area are required but not authorized. So in other words, it had to come out of pride of the organization. My boss is now Stephanie's boss, decided that I should have this job. And so I started having to just pretty much beg and plead. I need a captain, I need a lieutenant.
Yeah.
And so there was not provisions, there have not been provisions made for all of this. Stephanie suffered from the same constraints, especially military, downsizing to great depths. So it's been tough in a resource-scarce environment to come up with these people, but our previous speaker, the deputy CG for JBLM, made reference to the fact that we've had to make some tough decisions, but getting after the problem because we all share the common influence of our elected officials and the media, just like you do. And so they've made those decisions. We're going to have to carve these out to HiEd. And our Special Victims Counsel is one of the ones that was recently made available to us, and Matt can give you some ideas of why that's been useful or valuable or worthwhile. Wendy Russell made reference to the fact that their hospital is the only one that provides sexual violence clinics, and So your point is a good one. Where do you come up with this to have full-time staffing? It is, our leadership has made the decision that it is expensive, yes, but it is saving money in the long run from all of the other upheaval that would occur if we did not address this problem front on. So,
Yes, sir.
One of the issues that I think I'm interested in is the willingness, or if there's any concern by people coming forward and seeking counseling or assistance who might have been affected, maybe not directly by the assault, but by someone else. We deal with this on our campuses with our cadre, for example. The students, they have a social norm that they believe if they seek counseling, that's going to prevent them from getting into the military or advancing or those things. How do you deal with that? So is that a social norm that falls there with you all, and how do you manage and deal with that?
You'd be surprised as to how much it actually affects us. Myself being a rank qualified airborne infantryman, like the status quo, it's like, why is this guy one of the victim advocates? Sergeant first class, a platoon sergeant in combat, and squad leader in combat. Why is that guy a victim advocate? And honestly, it's because I wanted to. I really do. That was the prime reason of coming up to this position, lobbying for this position, because I wanted to help victims. I wanted to help the actual victims of the crimes themselves, and that's kind of where we have to fit in. So as the victim advocate, I'm everywhere. Like, in the 4,500 plus people we have in our footprint or our area, I'm down into the companies, introducing myself, making sure I'm known, so they're not afraid to come talk to me. So they're not afraid to, come into my office and just sit down and express what could be a very violent and very stressful situation. And then through myself, or through the Madigan, or through the CID, they have the out of the
So in the news you hear that soldiers, 13 years or more, soldiers are coming back with post-traumatic stress disorder at a fairly high rate. And the military has addressed that, and we're making progress to normalize that condition and to encourage soldiers to get the help they need. And it's the first steps of that have been senior leaders and senior NCOs saying that they have a problem and encouraging others to get the help that they do, so that they can move on in their career, they can move on with their life. And to take out the stigmatism of admitting that you experience something and it's having residual effects with you. We're doing the same now with sexual assault. So I have the benefit, I guess, of seeing what we call restricted reports in the military. We'll talk about this in a moment. But when a person comes forward and makes a report, it doesn't go to the investigators and it doesn't go to the chain of command. And what that means is that sexual assault will not be prosecuted and will not be investigated because it is closed hold and it is privileged. But what it allows that individual to do is to seek the behavioral health treatment, the medical treatment that they require, and it gives them a person that when that individual may not be able to explain something to their commander, to their NCO, to someone about what's going on, there's a stand-in that can help them with that. And what I have found is that we've been seeing a higher number of individual soldiers that make restricted reports, that get that immediate access to medical, to behavioral health, and to an advocate, then change their report to an unrestricted report that allows the investigative and prosecutorial pieces to this problem to move forward. So part of it really is that individual connection with the person and their support team that gives them kind of courage and the understanding that what happened to them was not their fault, and they can shift the focus back on the accused, on the perpetrator. So, but like anything, any kind of societal shift, it takes a long time. It starts with individuals and it starts with leaders.
So speaking about your question, which was regarding counseling, That's not necessarily going to mean somebody can't progress in their career, and that does not necessarily mean that they aren't going to be able to be an effective service member. Our goal is to be able to keep folks that want to remain in the military. We want them to be emotionally well, we want them to be physically well, we want them to be where they want to be. So we have treatment modalities that have been proven over and over again. Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, EMDR. That's a big one that people will pay lots of money to get trained in because it's effective in treating PTSD. We have staff that are trained in cognitive processing therapy. Again, that's an empirically validated treatment modality. And the goals are to make sure that those victims are dealing with the things that are bothersome to them and then can move on into what arena they want to after the event.
I said it sort of a two-parter. So the gentleman who spoke before was like, oh, we really want you to learn from the military and what we have done so well and the things that we haven't done so well. And so I'm curious about what are the programs that you, or what are some of the elements that are in place at JBLM that you feel like have been really effective, and what are the things that inform that? So how did you put those in place? What sort of assessment came before that, and then also how are you evaluating those implementations, and like what is the effectiveness after that? And like to feel if it's cool to talk about like this is no mess up, then like by all means, or this has been really successful and this is why you know it's there.
Wait till we back ourselves.
So as you go along with plenty of our different, as General Dahl said, the Resource Center, for instance, the assessment was that it really worked well and the word got out to the soldiers. I was down at company level with 35 people in my company. It was really small and they knew about it. So the Resource Center was an effective measure to get people to start reporting. As it's gone on, the assessments came about that we were getting more reports at, the brigade and the division level to the SARCs, Sexual Assault Response Coordinator. So it's not that it's going to shut down or anything, but that's the assessment is that it has become more effective to go through your brigade and that kind of thing. Some of the successful things we've had is ages of victim advocates, ranks of victim advocates. So I'm an officer, graduated college 3 years ago. So if another lieutenant was assaulted, they might feel more comfortable coming to me. But I've also had NCOs that have been assaulted by other NCOs who feel more confident in coming to me as well. So it really just depends. Or it could be a lieutenant that goes to start first prosecution. We also have victim advocates that are majors, lieutenant colonels. So there's every level is covered from the point that they become NCOs, you can become a victim advocate. And everybody's also NOVA credentialed, so they go through the background checks both locally and also nationally in order to become a victim advocate. So we pretty much do as many background checks as possible to ensure that the proper people are in the proper positions. So it's not an easy task to go. You go through 80 hours of training, and then on top of that, that's not the end. You go through another 3 months of waiting to get your credentials to actually have your.
And if you want to talk about something that was wrong, we're done at the beginning, I'm going to jump in there. Something we did wrong at the beginning is when we first started, we weren't doing the extensive background checks that we're doing. It is not easy in the military to get into a position like this right now. The background checks are local background checks, national background checks, sex offender background checks, behavioral background checks. We do an extensive amount of background before anybody is selected to take a job like this.
We do a lot of people at the problem very quickly, and that's what
Yeah.
And I think that's part of my question too, is I think sometimes that can happen and there isn't like steps in place for rigorous evaluation. And so when like these sound like really great ideas, and for example, I'm imagining like the resource center. Somebody was like, we should have a resource center. They were like, oh, there's like, if this is good, there's good evidence to suggest that people aren't coming in.
It's based off of a civilian practice. Many of it's the rape crisis center where you bring in prosecutors, police, and that's what it was based off of. And she's absolutely, Lieutenant Rowe is absolutely correct.
initially stood up for something else. It has grown, or it now professionalizes us a lot more. We are truly a fusion center. Because of the resource center, we don't want to take victims out of their units. We want them to report to their units. We want them to trust their units. But now the resource center has morphed. We are truly a fusion center. We're working together to fight. This whole team right up here works as a fusion center.
And so, yeah, I was just using that as an example, and I'm understanding that part, but I'm wondering, do you have like a process to monitor and evaluate programs that you, like, we're doing these background checks and just implementing them, and we can now see that, that's all.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, well, not for so much the background checks. We haven't seen sexual assaults go down. We've seen better advocates, better. Absolutely.
And those are the things that you evaluate, like, yeah.
And for the Sharp Resource Center, we're absolutely working on a logic model to develop measures of performance and effectiveness. So these are things that we are working on.
Do you want to address that a little bit?
Especially for higher ed.
So being at their assessment piece, I am the division chief of assessments. So I think one way I want to address it is one of the key successes we've had is we look across that panel right there. Because what we learned, we didn't do very well in the beginning. We stood up Sharp and we said, okay, you are the Sharp program lead, and it was just focused on that team. That panel is no longer just the Sharp team. The panel is the victim advocate who receives it in, gives them the stars of reporting into the medical, behavioral health, the support to the victim, the prosecution, the whole police side of it, into myself, the assessment system, the fusion and collaboration across everybody that we've been able to finally expand and realize. So that's the success, getting all the key players in to be part of the collective team, which is giving one focus to, okay, you're the Sharp lead, it's all you. No, it is the collective pulse. That's the very success we've had. And part of that is me coming forward saying, okay, how can I help you guys see yourself, see, as Jeremy all talked about, vulnerabilities and the threat, how can I help? So I pull in the data that they receive, and I help give feedback. Okay, here's what we see, targeting, if you're targeting on certain people, here's it's not a unit, it's not a race, what's going on. Confirm, deny those trends, so we know how to get prevention back into the right places and so forth. So again, it's that partnering and the fusion of all the assets that come together to get back that assessment. Are we being successful? Where is it? And then we capitalize on positive messaging there and refocus our area where it's not being successful. So that's hopefully that's your question.
Yeah, no, yeah, thank you, yeah.
I'd like to add one piece to that, and that would be that all our military installations are not the same. So when Matt Aisi and I were in upstate New York, we didn't have a hospital. We didn't have a special victims unit like Sarah's in. So what we end up having to do is collaborate with the off-campus, off-post facilities. Everybody's got some kind of something, right, in your local community, which is a great reason why we're talking right now, right? There are things that we can learn, things that Stephanie and I see as program managers that we should be sharing with our local communities, because although there's 150,000 people that live, work, and play at JBLM, most of them live in your community. And so the predators are the same, and the rape victims can frequently be those same people. But when you're constrained by your resources, perhaps you should be looking just off post to the sexual crime, assault crisis center, whatever we're going to call it, the shelters, the local law enforcement, to find out. I mean, my campus security isn't quite the same as the University of Washington's. How can we collaborate on that? And then you find, because you can mutually benefit one another, like our communities mutually benefit one another, then you might find that you have resources that you didn't know you had.
Yes, ma'am.
So I work at St. Martin's in the other campus. So we have about 30% of veterans, or and then a lot of family of veterans on our interactions on the and so I work with a ton of them. And I was wondering kind of how do you support like the family of survivors and family of victims? Is there support for them? Like, does that whole process work? Like, what are you responsible for in terms of like their civilian spouses or children or whatever?
Do you want to start, Special Agent Buckley, do you want to kind of address, not so much the support, but
it's kind of complicated. And I know that's kind of a cop-out of saying that there's a lot of laws and regulations that define who can receive services and whatever. But in terms of military families, as long as, I mean, I will investigate a sex assault crime, or at least get it routed in the right direction, no matter who reports it to me. The civilian, the break off clothes reports it to me. I'm going to make sure it's the right law enforcement agency. In terms of services provided, I'll let Captain IEC probably address that portion. But
Right, and I do want to interject a little bit here that, so we do have one person missing. I talked a little bit about our victim liaisons, but I think they and the SEC probably most actively address what you're asking about. So certainly for family members who are victims of domestic violence or sexual assault, there are programs to help those folks move on. And largely our victim liaisons manage that with a pretty large transitional compensation program that they oftentimes follow that for. It doesn't often require conviction. So even if we don't have a conviction, but the soldier is just separated, and there's been domestic violence, there's been sexual assault in the household, often these family members are entitled to conditional compensation. That is managed.
even if they're civilians.
Yes, particularly if they're civilians, yes.
There's a, in terms of like civilians who have no affiliation to the military, we work very much hand in hand with the local community, the state government, and so forth. There's federal laws that protect victims regardless of who the perpetrator is or where active or anything. So, I mean, we have a lot of oversight and a lot of programs that try to make sure that people aren't falling through the cracks. So that even if, you know, Captain IEC is not entitled, or that victim is not entitled to Captain IEC Special Victim Counsel's services, we're getting them to the right people to make sure that they are getting the services they need.
So to follow up with that, we have SHARP for victims that are service members and dependents below the age of 18. That's for sexual assault, also sexual harassment. They can also file a harassment report to us. Family advocacy program, they manage any of the domestic violence, spousal rape, relationship violence, so on. As far as child sex abuse, we work through Mary Bridge and Olympia and go through their resource center.
So if you have questions when you have family members, you should call our resource center, and they can tell you where those resources are. I know that the Campus Save Act that just went into effect this month requires some kind of like, we're learning from that, by the way. I thought that was pretty interesting how your advocates then need to provide information about on-campus and off-campus resources. And we sort of, we do that, we're just not very unified. So reading that new Campus Save Act was illuminating to us, saying we should be doing a little bit more stringent manner than we have been. But all our resource centers can help with family issues. Sir?
Okay, so a lot of the discussion has been about the response to sexual assault after something has already happened. So my question was, what are like the biggest changes you've had, like the changes and successes that you've had in like prevention? Is there like a curriculum that's been developed or being developed, and how is it being implemented across? Like, I know this is kind of like a high level, like kind of brigade core level, that might be kind of responsibility of like lieutenants and whatnot, but just kind of some insight on how prevention efforts are.
So in accordance with the Department of Defense, we have to take an online SHAR class every year. It's very much watch the videos, look at the questions, answer the questions, and that's an annual requirement. Do I say that's the only requirement we have? By no means, no. between SHARP seminars, between like myself and other SARPs, and having talking to the companies, platoon, battalions, to the battalion chain of commands. I mean, when I say we're everywhere, I'm talking like we're everywhere. And it's not stuff we can walk around with like, hey, SHARP. No, we walk around and we talk about it, we actually have to live it also. So in saying that, it's something you gotta live, not just be able to sit there and preach and teach, coach, mentor.
It's hard to put out a standard method of prevention. So what goes on in my brigade and what goes on in his brigade, that's our job to tailor that training to help prevention. You can't just say, hey, this is black-and-white prevention and everybody's going to do it. No, because my needs and his needs are different. So that's where SARs come in as commander's advisors to help tailor the prevention and response methods to his command.
The other thing I think is really important to know about the prevention piece, you have to include all components of this team, whatever the civilian equivalent on your campuses, to the prevention process. It's sometimes a lot more powerful, and people get it through their head a little bit easier if they have an investigator, a law enforcement officer telling them, hey, this is the crime, and it is a crime. It's something that we need to really realize, that a sexual assault isn't an unfortunate social injustice that's been done upon causing trauma. It's a crime. And a lot of people don't realize that. When you have the different components of the people who are victim-oriented, people who are more oriented to identifying subjects, and if you have all those people coming together and providing a more comprehensive prevention strategy, then you're going to be more effective in reaching all of your components of your population.
That was a great question, and I think that during our brainstorming session, one of the things Lieutenant Rowe was petulantly complaining about was the fact that we have been pretty much entrenched in the response as opposed to prevention. And it's true, but it's kind of like General Ball was saying today, we have to start with the crisis, right? So we started appointing people like Matt Aisi to be that victim advocates as an attorney. I'm not saying special victim counsel. We had to start with having a clinic that helps with those kinds of things. So as far as prevention is concerned, Stephanie and I have collaborated on a number of things. Most recently was about bystander intervention. So I know that one of the things that you are required to do now, and maybe always have been, but Campus Aid is really making that more stringent, is education and awareness. I have to say that we've done a lot of education and awareness, but that does not get to prevention per se. It's just really making people aware. What gets to prevention is the kinds of training we're talking about. And Sergeant First Class McCarthy can tell you how he's helped bring male victims out.
So, male victims for us is very difficult, especially in my case. I have been in the Army 20 years. I spent 18 of those in all male units. So transferring it and becoming selected for a job like this was very difficult, number one, but it allowed me to better conversate with our male victims. So they were more likely to come forward and talk, and I don't want to use the tough nut to crack, but it's tough for males to come forward. It is very difficult, but we made great headway, and
how did you do that?
It was through a lot of education, through a lot of talking, through a lot of being out there and building trust with other males in the unit. So a 19-year-old male who had been sexually assaulted by his 35-year-old boss is less apt to come talk to anybody, but through education and training and building a little trust and being out there with, it's hard to be out there with 4,500 guys, but you try to get out there and build that trust and rapport with them.
Welcome to you. Just one other thing I want to add that Alan and General Dahl both spoke about. For the military, it really has been involving the leadership. That truly is probably one of the biggest prevention things, is getting our leaders out there in front. They're attending the training. They're attending the awareness. They are intimately involved in preventing sexual assaults and training. Yes, sir.
I want to piggyback on this question as far as prevention and education. I don't know if you guys represent JBLM, but
military education has a sharp piece, absolutely. They get it from basic training, they get it in advanced training, every level of education in the military gets it, absolutely.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yes.
Those of us who have dorms or grade systems on our campus, what are the challenges in approaching a same-sex assault or, male-on-male assault? I mean, you and I both know that you said that crap.
It is, it actually is.
So how are you guys able to be successful in not just interviewing but aiding them?
So the aid of male victims is the same as if there was a female victim.
Sure.
They go through the exact same process. But it's more difficult for males, especially in the sorority and criminal court through this avenue, because I've had a lot of success getting males to come forward. I've had a male with multiple male offenders, and it's hard to get down to have them talk to you. It's very difficult, and I can't explain it in words, but
Yes, I can.
okay.
So Sergeant McCarthy, like so many of the others, and Sergeant Beecham and Mr. Outis, who's our civilian victim advocate out here, have made themselves part of the landscape. So that it's not odd. You don't say, oh, I'm talking to the DA. And it is in those small group discussions, whether it's in the smoking area or just sitting around in the motor pool, that where they don't look like they're unnatural to be talking to them, and they've created that trust, where then somewhere along the line he says, I'm going to talk to you about this. And I'm not trying to be sarcastic, because that is the halting, uncomfortable way that it begins. When I was deployed as a SARC, most of my victims that approached me were men, but it was in the healthcare environment. So I would get paged to go into the emergency room or the sick hall area, because they didn't feel like it was an odd place to be. So by having a victim advocate who met them in sick hall was very helpful in encouraging that, because then he could say, well, I really threw my back out because I was really humping that rucksack. And it's not what he was there for. But it's creating those opportunities to talk to someone who doesn't look like a victim advocate. Because usually, I go to these things off post, and usually the victim advocates are women. We went to a conference about 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, and all the victim advocates were women. The only men in the room were policemen. So.
Crisis Center the same way. The Pierce County Crisis Center, they came in and talked to us, and they were dumbfounded by the fact that there was actually like male victim advocates. And going to some McCarthy in our respective brigades, like our pictures are all over the place. Our
Lovely pictures.
That's terrible. That's quite terrible.
Do we have?
I think a key piece of fault of that too, and it's a little different than the opening addresses this morning that I need to highlight here, is don't polarize your audience here. A victim is a victim, period, and you gotta take that because there is male and there's female victims, so it can't be just female-focused victims come forward and forward. It's a victim. And then the guys feel like they're part of the program to come forward and report. It's the same thing on the offender side. Yes, the stats show that there's more males being offenders, but there are female offenders. So you got to be able to just neutralize in terms of the genders on those two sides, victim, offender, and that's it, so that it's a welcoming environment to come forward. And then I know I'm going to get the same support. I know it's not as we've done such a great job to support the females coming forward. If you come forward and report, you're going to get treatment, you're going to do this, and it's, I think we're now realizing in the Army that we went down that path on that one side only. And we've got to get back into the center lane of it's neutral. If you are a victim, come forward. And that would be key in these programs to keep it that neutral lane. You're a victim. Please come get the services that are available for you and help that you need.
I want to jump in really quick.
And we will get you, I promise.
So we started, I'm going to jump on feedback real quick, so you can answer your question. So the problem with the dorms with males reporting, we have to achieve that culture change where it's okay for males to report. And how we do that is by putting people down there to allow them to report. Like Colonel Flores, we said, it's not an everyday picture, so I go down there more often, and I'm down there 2 or 3 times a day, and I say hi. People are more apt to come talk to me without everybody knowing that there's a problem. Because if you walk into somebody else's house, they automatically assume that it's a problem. But if I'm down there 2 or 3 times a day, then it's not a problem. And then it allows mail to talk up inside or say, hey, but get my presence down there changes the way males act around other males. So if I'm down there today, it changes that change.
What if you asked about something they might have done wrong? And one of them was by sticking it squarely in the female soldiers' jurisdiction. I was running a program called Sisters in Arms to try to get to that. And every single time we were putting together one of these programs, the women complained, why is it just women? They felt picked out, they felt singled out, they felt burdened, they felt uncomfortable. And the same applies to all of these programs. As my colleague Kevin said, we have to make this really about the dignity and respect to a person, not to a gender, but to a person. And in that way, we elevate the program so that people say, hey, this is really a basic human moral requirement.
The whole panel so far uses the word victim, which you basically say the powerlessness, helplessness, which can also transmit, has as well known in Greek culture to the idea of victim blaming. So my question for you is, what have you done to empower victims, not only as individuals, but what have you done to convey the idea that victims aren't stripped of their agency, but that they are actually survivors and are stronger for it?
So some of us call, we say victim in here now, primarily because everybody understands the actual approach. We use the word client, we use the word survivor. Those are some of the terminologies. Soldier. And to empower them, they make all the decisions. Like every single decision is theirs to make. I'm the victim advocate here to support their decisions. And if they say, hey, Sergeant Beecham, I don't want to go to the Troy clinic or the top of the video over here, I'm not going to make them. It's their choice. If they don't want to make a report, as in a restricted report, they just want to come and talk, or they want to call me on the phone and talk. However, I've had several individuals that just walk in my office just to vent. And whenever I say, hey, would you like to make a report? No, I just need somebody to talk to. Okay. I'll come back and let me know if you're going to report to us.
I do think also, at every step along the way now, we have implemented for areas where they are providing more information, more ability to take control of the process. And so the fact that we have an SBC program now, where we have attorneys who advocate for their particular interests. So I like it because the prosecutor, that my interests are always aligned with the victim's interests, right? Like I want to get justice for that victim. I want that perpetrator in a jail cell. But I have to recognize that while that is not always the victim's number one interest. And so I do think that along the way now we've given them the power to advocate for what they believe are truly in their best interest. And we're giving them more information. We're requiring managers to give them updates along the way to make sure that they're fully informed about what's going on in their criminal investigation of the case. And even in the post-trial process, when we have gotten that conviction and we've got the perpetrator behind bars, we're making sure they also have a say in the post-trial process. So when we're talking about whether or not there's going to be some kind of clemency, is that soldier going to have the opportunity to have a little bit of his sentence reduced? They have the ability to now say, hey, here's how this affected me, and no way should this guy receive any workout, receive any clemency in the post-trial process. So I do think from reporting to post-trial, victims have more information and more ability to steer the process.
I want to add one little part to that too. As the investigator, I represent the part of the process that is the most intrusive and the most, it is the point that is critical, wherein that victim or survivor is going to be victimized again. They're going to have to retell their story and everything. The one part that we've adjusted fire within the military and the criminal investigation division is we've recognized that it is an intrusive process. We've put into practice making sure that the right people are talking to those victims, they have the right training before they're talking to those victims, and ensuring that when I bring a victim in and talk to them about their experience, I have to make sure that they've been advised that they have the right to a special victims counsel, that they have the right to a victim advocate before I start that intrusive process, to make sure that I'm protecting their rights as much as possible, so that it is a less intrusive process. Procedurally, we've also changed a lot as well. We don't go forward and talk to a person, say yes, no, you ask yes or no questions. Did you sleep with that person? Yes or no. No, we ask them to tell them their experience and empower them to tell us what they can remember. So we're not blaming them, or they don't have as much of an impression that we're blaming them about what happened to them, but having them know that we're here to investigate the case, gather facts without in an objective way.
I'll come back to you.
I was going to add a couple of things too, because, you know, we have a lot of our people that we see that are, you know, they're really uncomfortable, they're really unsure. And I think one of the biggest things is that the collaboration. So if they're sitting there and they're feeling like they're not getting supported in their work environment, you know, they have me to come to if they feel comfortable talking to me. And then I can help advocate with their command and say, this is why these things are showing up. Or I can call their victim advocate. I do that quite frequently. And I go, hey, this is what the client is telling me. Can you guys, you know, sit down with this person and talk to them? And so they end up feeling like they got heard. You know, some of the things that they're having a hard time with is not stuff that we can impact change on. But by somebody actually listening to them and trying to direct them to a resource, that builds that system of feeling empowered and feeling supported. And it gives them a lot more of the power back.
Yes, sir.
I'm wondering for each of you, why this assignment? I can't imagine you started your career saying this is how you spend some of your time. So why this?
So the brutally honest answer is this was the assignment that was given to me based on my level of experience in the military justice system, serving as both a prosecutor and as a defense counsel. But what it speaks to is my leadership's commitment to putting people with the level of experience into these kind of positions so that as a new program, it has a chance to get off its feet. So thankfully, my leadership has given myself and 3 highly experienced criminal litigators as special victim counsel. And in the military, we already know to do what our command and what our country tells us to do, and we do it to the best we can. So 4 months ago, had I been given the choice, would I have taken this assignment? I honestly probably would have said no, in full honesty, because it's not what I wanted to do. But taking a step back, it's not really up to me. I serve, and now that I'm in this position, I can say that I have seen a lot of great successes. Some of my clients have helped to move the state of military law forward by advocating on their interests and fundamentally have changed legal practice locally and across the entire military. So now that I'm in it, I can actually see the personal and professional rewards that I receive, but also I can see that people that I represent see it from their point of view. When I was a prosecutor, I did things to help the case, such as going over a victim's story ad nauseum, because when I was in court, I wanted to make sure that it came out the way that I thought would be best to get a conviction. What I didn't really ever think of was how traumatizing that was. And it really wasn't up to me to advise that client or that victim about their rights, because I represented the government. So I see the holistic approach, and now that I get to be part of it, I'm actually quite thankful. And I think for most people, sometimes in the military, you're given a job to do, and if you don't like it when you start, for most of us, you end up truly enjoying what you're doing, who you're doing it with, because once you're given that that mission, you can run with it, and you can make it better than when you left it.
All right, we're going to move over here. We have about 15 minutes left. I would like to leave 5 minutes at the end for us to, if you don't want to talk publicly, at least give us 5 minutes and we can mingle with the crowd. So we're going to do about 10 more minutes, and then we'll leave 5 minutes for us just to talk one-on-one if need be. And yes, ma'am, and then I'll come back to you. Can you repeat the question?
She was asking about the interim measures that we put in place to help against retaliation, correct? Okay, so it's what's called the reprisal plan for us. There's also the military protective order, there's also the civilian protective order, which could be either domestic violence or sexual assault, depending on how we or the client or survivor or victim, not have to word it, however they want to do it. So if they do want a military protective order, we type it up, we submit to the chain of command, and we observe the commanders giving that protective order to that soldier. That way we can, as the victim advocates, we can tell the victim, say, hey, it has been given. Here is a copy. If this individual gives that to you, notify the disease directly, and he will be arrested. Civilian protective order is the same thing. We got 500 feet outside the military base. And even now, MPOs are actually, military protective orders are actually being inputted in active time negotiations. So,
reprisal plans are documents that are built by brigade commanders at our level that inform the victim, survivor, / client, and everybody who's involved if there's any change in the reporter's status, if they're put on extra duties, if they're being reprised against by any means, then the commander will take action.
The military has worked very hard at this change, and that is part of changing our culture, is leaders understanding that there cannot be a reprisal for I think we've really made a lot of progress in the last 7 years. Yes, ma'am, you had a question.
I just want to ask about, in the college realm that we deal with policy violations rather than criminal cases, how do you deal with that in the military? There are cases that sometimes may not rise to the level of information so that they can be prosecuted. What do you do in those cases?
Well, regardless of if there's any sexual overtones on any sort of incident, we investigate, period. It's a felony level investigation. Now, for like sexual harassment type cases or whatever, they still go to the sharp office. They're still investigated with what we call an Article 15, or Army Regulation 15-6 investigation, which is initiated through the command. And any sort of shortfallings that aren't with the regulation or are corrected by the command. And if they do fall within a criminal category, then they are pushed over to my office and do that investigation. Now,
right. So if you're asking in particular about a reporter sexual assault where, for whatever reason, we just can't prosecute, because we all know that there are those cases. These cases are complex, oftentimes there's 2 people there, alcohol involved, all of those other issues. So when a case cannot be prosecuted, first of all, we take a look at collateral that may need to prosecute for the collateral misconduct. We'll also look at administrative options. So just because we think of the word criminally, there certainly are a plethora of military, I mean, there's so collateral county, other criminal or that can be what misconduct, if what happened, even if we can't prosecute allegations.
So back to your original question, there are so many cases that do not meet the standard of proof for a prosecution. So what do you do then? The Army has imposed a couple of administrative actions that are possible, not just Article 15 or chapters out of the Army, but also expedited transfers. So like if the victim doesn't want to live in that particular facility any longer, we make it possible for him or her to be moved elsewhere, sometimes to another state. Another one would be change of duty. Have a change of duty somewhere. Class schedule change, norm change. But most cases are surrounded by that sort of uncertainty, aren't they? And so it's difficult, and certainly that's in the news a lot lately, for college campuses. So it's incumbent upon us to figure out different ways that we can aid and give confidence and control back to the person who victimized.
Okay, we'll take one more question, yes ma'am. And then we will, please keep your questions and then we'll break and we'll mingle. Yes ma'am.
So, as an Army spouse stationed at JBLM, thank you for all of this. This is so exciting for me. As someone who is really relatively new to the area, but I've been working in the field of sexual assault prevention and victim advocacy for well over a decade. So exciting, really exciting to just be at Madigan and see your passive programming and outreach that you're doing there. So thank you for that. And mine is really more of a comment than a question, really, and sort of a piece for us to consider, those of us who are working in higher ed, in terms of takeaway from this session. We're really seeing in higher education this pendulum swing away from a victim-survivor-centered approach toward a more institution-centered approach and sort of that protecting the institution. So I guess really my comment here is how pleasantly surprised I am at how victim-survivor-centered you are in philosophy and approach and practice. And I don't think that that's something that civilians really know about. And I understand that JBLM is differently resourced than other places, but it's just a sort of awareness level for me right now in this space. And just really interesting, especially when we think about, sort of this perspective that maybe colleges and universities are doing it this way, the military is doing it this way. I just have had sort of a flip on that. Sitting in this space with y'all today, and I really appreciate your approach and your training, and just appreciate that very much.
The military has certainly worked very hard. I mean, that is why SHARP was developed and focused on it. So the military has worked very hard. All right, we are going to go ahead and close it out. We will be here for another 5 minutes before we go back. Please, we will come off the stage, come down and meet. And we do have business cards. We have some pamphlets that went around. So please take our card, take the pamphlets, and